Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Moed Katan Daf Tes Vav Moed Katan 15. And today's Daf Yomi we're going to talk about the laws of mourning, the laws of Avelus, and the laws of mourning in the Gemara are going to be associated with also the laws of a menuda, somebody who is excommunicated, and also somebody who is a mitzora, somebody who is what we call a mitzora, somebody who has a biblical disease, which they translate often as leprosy, a spiritual disease that manifests itself as a skin ailment. But the Gemara is going to talk about mourning. The Gemara is going to refer to several passages in the Bible. One is the passage about the sons of Aaron who are told not to mourn. And from that, we learn what everybody else has to do as a way of mourning. We also learn about Ezekiel, whose wife died, and he was also told not to mourn, so that the children of Israel would see as a prophecy how there are going to be so many tragedies that they won't have time to mourn for all them. And so we learn from that how to mourn. And also we learn from Yoav telling a woman to dress up like a mourner to try and tell Avshalom to come back. So we learn from that how a mourner behaves. So those are the three main passages which form the basis for the laws of mourning, which we're going to share, which we're going to compare also to the laws of Menuda and Mitzora. In addition to this, there's a major source from Maseches Tanis, which talks about how you're supposed to act on a public fast day. And from there we learn, because there it was a day of excommunication from heaven, we learn about also excommunication of people and also mourners as well. So it says the Gemara on the bottom, two lunch on the bottom of 14b, a mourner is not allowed to get a haircut. From the fact that God says to the children of Aaron, you should not grow your hair long, because you should not observe the laws of mourning. We see from here that everybody else is prohibited to cut their hair. From the fact that it's sons of Aaron, we're not allowed to we're not supposed to let their hair grow long. We see from here that everybody else is supposed to let their hair grow long. Who's a mourner? The Gemara on the top of Moed Katan 15a states, Menudin u'mitzorain ma'hen b'tispora. What about a menuda and a mitzora? Are they allowed to get a haircut? Tashma says the Gemara in a Brisa, Menuda and Mitzora and Asur l'saper al-chabes, and Menuda and Mitzora are prohibited to get a haircut and to do their laundry. Menuda, Shemes, if a Menuda dies, Bezdin Soklin Esarono, the court will place stones on his coffin. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Loshi Amido of Avanim Kikawasho. Not that they place stones on him like happened to Achan after he was killed, stoned after he took from the booty in the book of Joshua. Rather, the court places a large stone on his coffin to let everybody know that anybody who's excommunicated and he dies, the court will stone him, place stones on his coffin, because it's an indication that he died as an excommunicated person, because otherwise we have to explain how are we able to come close to his coffin. This teaches us how we're able to come close to his coffin. A mourner is obligated in atifas harosh. The atifas harosh is the wrapping of one's head in a turban as part of the mourning process. We don't do this anymore because today it's not done. And so it would be a mockery to do it. Yeah, well, right, actually, we do it. Meyer is pointing out, if you have your mask on, if you're wearing your mask, and you put your hat over your head, that's basically a tifas harosh. Yeah, you do like a tifas harosh would be something, I guess, like this. On the bottom, it would look like this, right? That would be, and then on the top like this, so that would be like a tifas harosh. So the mourner is obligated to do a tifas harosh. From the fact that God said to Yechezkel when he told him not to mourn for his wife, don't pull it up to your mustache. Everybody else is obligated. Menuda, what about a menuda? Amarav Yosef, Tashma, Vehemis Atim, Yoshvik, Menudin, and Avelim. On a public fast day from the Gemara in Tainis, the person wraps himself and sits like an excommunicated and like a mourner until heaven has mercy on you. We see from here that a menuda is a tifas rosh. So the Gemara says no, but that case is different. That person was a menuda from heaven, like that God didn't let it rain. says Abaye, Dilma Menuda L'Shamayim Shani Dechamir. Maybe a Menuda to heaven is stricter because that's the heaven, so you have to wrap yourself. But maybe a regular Menuda doesn't. Mitzora Ma'al Batifas Rosh. What about a Mitzora? Tashma Val Sfam Yateh. Mitzora is supposed to put his garment up to his mustache. Mikol Shachai Batifas Rosh. So we see from here that he's obligated in atifa. Avo Asar Tefillin. A mourner is not allowed to wear tefillin. What's the source for this idea? From the fact that the Torah says to Ezekiel, wear your glory, meaning to say, even though you're a mourner, wear your glory. From the fact that he has to wear his tefillin, therefore, so tefillin are called glory. So from the fact that Ezekiel must wear his tefillin, we see everybody else is prohibited. Menuda ma'al b'tefillin. What about a menuda? Does a menuda wear tefillin? Teika, we don't know. Mitzora ma'al b'tefillin. By the way, a mourner. So today, a mourner doesn't wear tefillin the first day, even the day of the Levaya. Even after the Levaya, the minhag in America is generally speaking not to wear tefillin. Although in Jerusalem, the minhag is to wear tefillin after the Levaya. So the Gemara says, Mitzora ma'al b'tefillin. What about a Mitzora? Should a Mitzora wear tefillin? Tashma v'atzarua v'rabos kohen gadol. Tzarua comes to include it says in the pasuk the v'hatzarua. That teaches us that a kohen gadol can also become a Mitzora. Begadav yufrumim, that the leper's garments are torn. What does that mean? You mikuraim, you tear the garments. V'rosho yeparua, his head shall let his hair grow. Aim priel gidol seir. It means let his hair grow long. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says. But Rabbi Akiva says, Nemar Havaya Barosh. It says the word Haya by the head. The Nemro Havaya Babeged, and by the garments. What does that teach us? Havaya Mor Babeged, Davar Shachutz Megufo. Just like the Havaya by a garment refers to something outside their body. So to Havaya Barosh, Davar Shachutz Megufo refers to something outside your body, meaning to say your head shall be bare, no tefillin. That's what Rabbi Akiva is saying. My love at tefillin, it must be on tefillin. So Amar Papa, he's not arguing with Rabbi Akiva, but he's saying he must have had a different version of Rabbi Akiva. He says, "Look, kum to v'sudra." No, it means that a Mitzora is not supposed to wear a turban or a fancy hat. Avel aser b'shel shalom, the mourner is not allowed to greet people. The Kamei Rachmani El Chazkel, like God says to Ezekiel, "Hey, anek dom, be silent." Menuda ma'al b'shel shalom. What about a menuda? Amar Rav Yosef Tashma. And in greeting a person, like a person who is nizufa to the God. So that we see from here that the menuda is supposed to sit excommunicated on the public fast day. So but maybe that's different. Dilma menuda shemayim shani. Maybe a public fast day is different because there you are menuda from heaven and not from a regular court. The Chamir. Mitzora mal b'shel shalom. What about a Mitzora? Tashma val sfam yateh. What does that mean? The Mitzora's lips, the garment should be up to his lips. She was sifaso sav medubako zubazu. That his lips should be pressed to each other. She'ek menuda uka avel aser b'shel shalom. And it means that a Mitzora is supposed to be like a menuda and an avel and prohibited in greeting. Shema mina. We see from here that the menuda is not allowed to greet people. We see from here that the Mitzora is not allowed to greet people. So the Gemara says, well, but we also see from here that a menuda is not allowed to greet people because it says, menuda ka'evel. So why don't we answer the question we had before, whether or not a menuda is allowed to greet people? So Mamar Rav Acha bar Pinchas, Rav Yosef, no, Mika Tonisha Aser. It doesn't say that the menuda is not allowed to greet people. It says, Shiek menuda ka'evel katani. All it says is that he's supposed to be like a menuda or an avel, but that refers to other matters. And also the Mitzora is prohibited in Sheila Shalom. Mourner is not allowed to recite words of Torah. God says to Ezekiel, don't be silent. So that teaches us what else would Ezekiel be talking about? Ezekiel is only talking about Torah. So therefore, it teaches us that a mourner is not allowed to study Torah. Menuda ma'avad divrei Torah. What about a menuda? Rav Yosef Tashma menuda shona v'shonelo. A Menuda is allowed to teach Torah, and we teach him. Niskar is allowed to hire people, and we hire him. Muchram, somebody who's ultimately excommunicated and then excommunicated again is not allowed to teach, and we don't teach him. When Niskar, we can't hire him, and he doesn't hire people. Aval, what does he do? Shono la'atzmo. The muchram, which is more severe than menuda, he's allowed to teach himself. So we don't want him to interrupt his studies. Chanus Katana, we give him like a concession to get a small shop, bishvil parnasa, so he can make a living. What kind of shop we give him? Maya b'pakta de arvos. We give him water. He's selling water in the marketplaces of Aravos. Now, those days, water was not a big job. Here, you could sell water for $3 a bottle, but in those days, it was a small job selling the water. Mitzora ma'o b'divrei Torah. What about a mitzora? Can a mitzora study Torah? So the Gemara says, we'll cite the verse from Deuteronomy. Tashma v'odatam levanecha uvnei vanecha yom asher amatav v'nei Hashem l'kachem b'chorev. You should make known to your children the day you stood before God in Choreb. What does that mean? It means that just like over there when we stood at Sinai, it was with fear and trembling. So to here, we see from here that all these people who are trembling, the Zav and the Mitzora, even though they have ritual impurity, but since they're trembling, they're allowed to read the Torah and the Vim and the Ksuvim and to study the Midrash and the Shas and the Halachos and the Agados and also the Bolei Nidos. These are people who are trembling, but Balei Kriyan Asurin. But the person who has an omission, that is coming from a place of joy, she says, and so therefore they're not feeling the of lightness, and therefore they're not feeling the aim of the yira. They're not feeling the fear and the awe of Hashem. So therefore, they need to wash themselves before they can study Torah. Although also a mourner is prohibited to do their laundry. How do I know this? Because it says when Yoav sent it, Yoav took a woman, the Isha Tekoa, and he took from here. It's not the Isha Tekoa is listed later in the Bible, but this was Isha Tekoa in 2 Samuel 14, not the Isha Tekoa from the book of Kings, although some say it's the same, but he took this woman and he told her to dress herself like she's a mourner and to go to Avshalom. Dress like you're a mourner. And don't put this oil on. Dress like you're a woman who's mourning for somebody for many days. So we see from there that she wears the clothing that's not laundered. A mourner wears clothing that's not laundered. Mitzor and Mayim b'techboses. What about menudin and mitzorin? Are they allowed to do the laundry? Tashma menudin mitzorin asur sabro chabeis shramina. The Brisa says that they're not allowed to. So that's it. They don't cite a source. They just cite a Brisa, which they don't cite like a biblical source. So that's interesting. So it says Abel chayav b'kriya, mourners obligated to tear their garments. The Garmo Rachmano of Aaron, because God says to the sons of Aaron, "Lo tifromu, you don't tear your garments." Mikal, from here we see the Kuliyam Machayvi. Everybody else is obligated. Menuda Mal B'Kriya. What about tearing? An excommunicated person can he tear? Teku. So we leave it unresolved. She just paused. We should have mentioned this at the very beginning. What are these laws, biblical or rabbinic? The laws of a mourner. So according to most commentaries, the laws. According to a very, very small minority, the laws are biblical, even sitting the entire Shiva. And we see in the Bible that they mourned for Jacob for 7 days. But we have this concept that once the Torah was given, the law is like reawoken, and so you can't apply the laws from before Sinai. So most say that the first day is biblical. The first day of mourning is biblical, and after that it's rabbinic. And then some say every law is rabbinic. So the Gemara says, Mitzora Ma'u B'Kriya. What about a Mitzora? Can they tear their garments? Tashma, or are they supposed to tear the garments? Tashma begadav shiyu frumim. What does that mean? The garment should be torn. Shiyu mikurai, it means the garment should be torn. Shema mina, that a Metzora wears torn garments. Well, as a question, do they have to tear their garment, or is it enough just to wear a torn garment? That's the question. It used to be that if they had a bed, they turned over their bed as part of the mourning process. We don't do that anymore. Our beds are different, but we do a little different. We sit on a low chair, so maybe that's connected to this. A mourner is obligated to turn over their bed to Tani Bar Kapara. We're on the top of 15b. It states, Bar Kapara taught, the Musti Yukni Nasati Bahen. I gave you an image of myself, and you turned it over. And for that reason, kafu mitosein, turn over your beds. So that's why this is the source of the idea, because we ruin the image of God with man's sin. Therefore, we cover the mirrors at a shiva house. What about a menuda mitzora? Are they supposed to turn over their beds? Take unresolved. Avel aser basiyas malacha, mourner is prohibited to do work. How do we know that? Because it says v'afachti chagechem ha'eva. I'll turn your festivals into mourning. That's what the verse states in the book of Amos. Ma'achag aser b'malacha, af eva aser b'malacha. Just like a festival is prohibited to do work, so too a mourner. Menuda ma'al basiyas malacha. What about a menuda? Amarav Yosef. Tashma kisha amru aser basiyas malacha. When they say you're not allowed to do work, they only said this during the day. But at night it's permitted. So that was by a public fast day. We said that on a public fast day, you're not allowed to do work, and so too a menuda and a mourner. So Ma'alav doesn't refer to all the laws of a fast day apply to a menuda, including doing work. The Gemara says no, ashara refers to the rest, which Rashi says refers to the wrapping of the head. That's what a mourner should do, not necessarily not working. Tashma, different attempt. Menuda shonen lo niskav niskaron lo. Menuda can teach, and we teach him, and can hire people when we hire him. Shema mina, we see that the menuda can do work. Mitzora ma'al basiyas malacha. What about a mitzora? Can he do work? Take it, unresolved. Aval aser berachitza, a mourner is not allowed to bathe. Because it says that Yoav, when he sent the woman from Tekoa, he says, do not put oil on yourself, and bathing is like oil. And so therefore, we see from here that a mourner is not allowed to bathe. Menuda ma'al berachitza. What about a menuda? When they said that the mourner is not allowed to bathe, actually we're talking about the public fast. When you said that on the fast day you're prohibited to bathe, called gufo, of a pun of yadav ragov mutter. You can't bathe your whole body on a fast day, but you're allowed to bathe your face, hands, and legs. This is a public fast day because of the lack of rain or of a different distress. And so too we find by a menuda and a mourner. So we see from here explicitly that the menuda, it seems to be explicit, that the menuda is not allowed to bathe. Doesn't mean that the menuda can't bathe. Shara, no, refers to the other things. Like we said before, it's just like on a public fast that you wrap yourself, so too, here too, the menuda should wrap himself. Not necessarily saying anything about bathing. Metzora malbrachitza. What about a metzora? Are they allowed to bathe? Take unresolved. Avo asher b'nila sandal, mourner is not allowed to wear shoes. The fact that God says to Ezekiel, v'na'alecha tasim b'raglecha, you should wear your shoes. They call the kol yalma asar. We see from here everybody else is prohibited. Menuda ma'al b'nila sandal. What is menuda allowed to wear shoes? And Rabbi Yosef Tashma, we learned it in the going back to Mesachas Tainus when they talked about a public fast day. When they say you're not allowed to wear shoes on a fast day, it's only in the city. But on the road, mutter, you're allowed to wear your shoes. Okay, so what do? You go out to the road. Noel, you put on your shoes. When you get into the city, you remove your shoes. So too you find by the menuda. And by the mourner. So we see from here, menuda also can't wear shoes. Umar said, no, ashara, it's referring to the other things like we said before. Mitzora malbani asana, what about mitzora and shoes? Take it, unresolved. Okay. Mourner is not allowed to have marital relations with their spouse. After the Shiva, David after David set Shiva for his son who died, the first son from Bathsheba, it says that David was comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and then he had relations with her. We see from here, from that union, by the way, Shlomo Melch, but we see from here that prior, while he's sitting Shiva, is prohibited. Menuda Malbatash Shamita, what about a Menuda? Can they have relations? I'm Rav Yosef Tashma. We learned Kol Osan Shanim, all those years. Kol Osan Shanim, all those years where the Jewish people were in the wilderness. Shayu Yisrael Midbar Menudin Ayu. They were Menudin from Hashem. They were Menudin. They were in Goas. They were in the wilderness. Vishim Shemitil saying, and they engaged in relations. Don't we see from here a solid proof that a Menuda is permitted in to have relations? Amaroi Abai says, no, maybe the Menuda to heaven is different. The kio, it's more lenient. Gemara says, wait 1 second. On the previous page, you just said Abaya, you said twice that a Menuda to heaven is stricter, and you brought a Kabbalah Chomer, and now you're saying that maybe it's more lenient. So the Gemara says, well, Abai wasn't sure. You said it's stricter. So the Gemara says, Abai is Sepukim and Sapulem. Abai wasn't sure if Menuda to heaven is stricter or more lenient. What's the svara that'd be more lenient? The svara that'd be more lenient is because there was never a formal nidoi process. So maybe it's more lenient. So Abai wasn't certain. Mitzora mal b'tashma shemita. What about a mitzora? Can they have relations? Tashma detanya v'yashiv. That after the mitzora is purified, he goes through 7 days of counting, and only then can he go to Beis Mikdash and bring a korban. So the Gemara says v'yashav mechutz la'ol. During these 7 days, he stays outside the camp, and it says we learned in the Brisa. And he's like a menuda and a mourner, and he's prohibited to tashmish. And the 10 refers to his wife. As it says, that it says, go back to your tent. So, and that means to be with your wives after Sinai. Shema, we see from here that a mitzora is not allowed to be with his wife during those 7 days. Mar says, but it says in that bright that also a menuda can't have relations. So why don't we learn from here? It doesn't say that the menuda is prohibited to have relations. It says it says that he should be like the menuda and the mourner, but that refers to the other things, like for example, wrapping yourself. And he's also prohibited to have relations. A mourner is not allowed to send his sacrifice to the temple as a proxy. Bring a korban shlomim. This is the shlomim is the sacrifice that the baal, that the person who offers it gets to eat from it. But that is only when he is shalem, only when he's whole. Not when he's an onain, meaning an onain is a person, Rahman al-Atzlan, who lost a relative before the relative has been buried. Menuda ma'ashe yishlach karbanos. What about a menuda? So what about a menuda? Can a menuda bring his korban? So hold on 1 second. So what about a menuda? Amar Rav Yosef Tashma Kos and Shalom Shal Yisrael Midbar Menuda Nayu V'Shachal Karban saying that all those days the Jewish people were in the wilderness, they were menuda, and yet they still sent their sacrifices. They were menuda from heaven. Then we see from here that the menuda can send it. Abai says the same answer. Maybe the menuda to heaven is different.
Rabbi, what's a menuda?
A menuda is somebody who's excommunicated. We're going to learn about this primarily in the next daf. We're talking about somebody who is disrespectful to the court, to the rabbis, to the court, and therefore they're excommunicated. It will be the discussion on the next page. The next page, tomorrow's daf will be the focus on it.
But you just said that the people in the desert were menuda. They were right, excommunicated from God, were they?
No, so that's exactly the point that Abai is making, that there's 2 types of menuda. One is a person who's formally executed. It's an excellent question. One is a person who's formally excommunicated from the court. And then the people in the wilderness were going to be considered as though they were excommunicated from God because we were in exile. So it's as though. It's as though. It's not exact. It's not the exact same thing. And that's why Abai says that the comparison breaks down, because maybe those people in the wilderness should be judged by a stricter law, or maybe they should be judged by a more lenient law. But that's right. The analogy is inexact. And that's why that's what Abai's situation with it is. So now the Gemara will just do this last piece. Mitzora Ma'ashe Yishlach Karmanosav, Shen Mitzora send his offerings. Tashma the Tanya, it states about the Mitzora that so we learn about the Mitzora that after Yechezkel, the Navi tells about a Kohen who becomes Tamei, that after it says in Achrei Taraso, and after he is purified, he has to count 7 days. It can't be. So it says, this doesn't make sense. After he separates from the dead, and he's it can't mean after he's purified that he counts 7 days. It means after he separates from the dead, he counts 7 days. But it can't be that's what it is, because that refers to, it was the Zayin Yimei Sfira. This refers to the 7 days of counting, that he has to count 7 days of purification prior to being purified. And then he has the ashes sprinkled on him of the red heifer, and then he's purified. And then it says, Ubiyom Ba'u al Kodesh, and on that day he comes to the Kodesh, El Chatzar Panimis L'Shareis Ba'Kodesh Yakriv Chataso. He comes to bring his carbon, do a Siris Haifa. This refers to the sacrifice, or giving a general law about a Kohen. The first day that he serves in the temple, he brings a mincha tzchinuch, an inaugural offering. That's the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, Biva'o Yakriv, that when he comes to the temple, that when he's purified, he could bring his offering. Only when you could come to the temple can you send an offering. But when you're not able to come into the temple, when you're counting your 7 days, you're not able to bring your sacrifice. And that's the source of the idea that a Mitzora cannot send an offering. Okay, my dear friends, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, happy to address.